Hi, my name is Susan Lawton and I attend Liberty University. This is my video presentation for my interpersonal communication project for class Hsco 508, Studies in Interpersonal Communications. Next slide, please. My overarching goal for my life is to improve my relationships with my family, my coworkers, my patients and their families, and most importantly, Jesus, through improved communication skills. John Stewart says there is a direct link between the quality of your communication and the quality of your life. I believe that and I want to make it happen. Next slide. Enlarging the conversation. We're able to improve our communication skills when we enlarge our conversation. That means we identify a need that we have in communicating, and we find resources to improve that need. Next slide. I am a married mother of two sons, ages 25 and 28, and I have three stepchildren, ages 25, 30, and 32. I have a Bachelor of Social Work degree from VCU in Richmond. I'm working toward a Master of Arts degree in Human Services Counseling at Liberty University in Lynchburg. I currently work as a care manager at a 400-bed acute care hospital in Richmond. I work with my patients to set up the best discharge plan available. I also help with any psychosocial issues that patient and or their family members may have. I'm an accredited case manager through the American Case Management Association. Next slide. My early years, I grew up with parents who communicated by arguing, so I didn't learn very good communication skills. I know my parents didn't realize how their arguing was affecting me and my siblings. Through counseling and through taking classes like this, I've learned to overcome some of the communication habits I acquired as a young child. A parent influences how their children learn to communicate by how they stroke them. It can be positive or negative. If a parent tells you angrily to shut up all the time, that's obviously a negative stroke. So they learn not to talk. If they do not listen to you, you learn not to listen either. Parents have to take time to listen to their children no matter what and give them positive strokes so they learn how to communicate well. Next slide. One of the tools we used in this class was a self-assessment called Uniquely You, developed by Dr. Miles Carbonell. He assessed our behaviors and our personality patterns, and there were 4 temperaments in the model. The first is D, which is active and task-oriented. People who are D's are directing, driving, determined, and doing. Second was I, which is active and people-oriented. I's are inspiring, interactive, and interested in people. S is the third letter, which is passive and people-oriented. S's are steady, stable, shy, and submissive. And finally, C, which is a passive and task-oriented person. C's are cautious, competent, compliant, and careful. Next slide. The assessment showed us our behavioral blend personality profile. I scored a high D, which means I like challenge, freedom, authority, and variety. Being a D, I think people expect me to be dominant, direct, demanding, and determined. Also being a D, others see me as confident, stubborn, and determined. Sometimes I come across as cocky and bossy, and intimidating and threatening. The word threatening really caught my attention. It made me realize I needed to make some changes in my communication style. I'm a blend of DIC, which means I feel like I'm dominant, inspiring, and cautious. I'm task-oriented and can usually handle pressure pretty well. I'm not a very sensitive person. I feel good about myself, but sometimes can become overly confident. I think this goes back to my feelings of low self-esteem when I was younger. Once you get over those feelings of low self-esteem, it's hard to contain your enthusiasm for almost anything. Now, I'm usually more positive than negative. I spent so many years being negative that now I better relate to those who are confident, competent, and enthusiastic. I can make decisions, but I like to plan and prepare. I can entertain and I can express myself, and I like the limelight most of the time. Next slide. Another self-assessment tool we took was the interpersonal communication skills test. I scored a 69 out of 100, which supposedly meant my communication skills were good, but 69 seems low to me. My highest score was in verbal expression, which does not surprise me. I'm able to get my point across usually very easily. My lowest score was in emotional management. I don't mind discussing emotionally charged issues, but I can become defensive and overwhelmed by them. Next slide. Part of this course was about learning to listen, really listen. There are 3 levels of listening. The first is empathetic listening. This is my goal. If I listen empathetically, I will not judge the one talking. I'll put myself in their position and try to see the things from their point of view. And I'll be present in the moment, acknowledging and responding to the speaker. I won't be distracted, and I'll pay attention to the nonverbal communication as well as the verbal. And I'll listen from the heart. The second level is hearing words, but not really listening. Here you stay at the surface and you don't really understand the deeper meaning of what the speaker's trying to say. You listen logically, thinking more about content than feeling. And the third level is listening in spurts. You basically are not listening. You're self-absorbed, thinking about yourself, tuning in and out. It's quiet and passive with no response from you. You follow the conversation, just waiting for the chance to talk. Next slide. Again, just listening. Other reasons to listen emphatically are that it increases your knowledge, it makes you more productive, and enhances the self-confidence of others. It's the single most effective approach to problem solving. It also reduces stress and tension. Next slide. There was another self-assessment tool that we took in Burley Allen's book. I scored an 89 on that assessment, which was only average. I learned the meaning of defensive listening and realized I do that a lot. I need to be able to listen to someone even if they're coming to me with a problem that involves me. I need to respond positively without becoming defensive to make sure it's a productive conversation and not something that turns into an argument. Next slide. We all have barriers to communication. One of the barriers to communication for me is where I work is noise. I've had to get used to the noise and learn to listen to others in spite of it. As Dr. Deborah Kesbaum says in her article, Listening for Better Professional Relations, hearing is done with the ears and listening is done with the ears and the mind. Hearing comes naturally, but listening does not. We have to learn how to listen, and most people are not formally taught how to do that. Next slide. A second barrier for me is while working in a busy environment and having a lot to do, I tend to interrupt people who are talking to me if I think they're taking too long to get to the point or if I think they're wasting my time. That's very disrespectful of me and I need to change that. Next slide. My third barrier is that I tend to get defensive in my thinking if I don't like what the speaker's saying. From now on, I need to ask questions to clarify what the speaker is saying and not just react to it. Burley Allen talks about befuddling. She says it's the degree to which verbal communication is misinterpreted, distorted, and filtered out as it passes up, down, and through an organization. By asking clarifying questions, we can try to reduce the misunderstandings or befuddling. Next slide. We all have internal noise pollution. It can be your emotions, it can be biases that make you judge or label someone before you really hear what they have to say. It can be anything going on in your head that distracts you from listening. It can be just be that you're tired. Some solutions to your internal noise pollution for me are to be aware of words that are emotionally charged for me, learn what my biases are, and then take courses like this one to learn how to really listen to what people are saying. Next slide. External noise pollution is what we all deal with as well, and it's environmental noises like phones ringing. In my case, at work, it's bed alarms, call bells, people hollering, people typing, lots of phones ringing, and lots of beepers going off, and multiple discussions going on at the same time. Sometimes it can get overwhelming, and I try to leave the floor for a few minutes if I need to. We've implemented things like lowering the lights for rest time, and that tends to quiet conversations. The hospital has also stopped overhead paging unless it's an emergency. One of my strengths is being able to constantly reprioritize and manage my workflow because it changes frequently during the day. I get interrupted frequently, but I do not let that deter me from my current priority unless I need to. I found Rebecca Schaefer's essay, Mindful Listening, in Stewart's book to be very interesting. She states that mindfulness is the opposite of multitasking. She goes on to say that you are less effective when you multitask than when you are mindful about your work. Every day I see coworkers trying to do everything they're asked to do, and it's just not possible. But their work ethic drives them to try to do it all, which leads to much frustration. We all have to multitask to a certain point, but we really need to just slow down. All of the multitasking, I think, leads to the befuddling I mentioned earlier. Another of Schaefer's comments is, don't just do something, sit there. And that certainly goes against our work culture these days. I'm actively trying to do that and still be productive. I feel like a pioneer, though, and I sometimes get a lot of pushback from my coworkers who think I'm not working hard enough. And so I just tell them that I think I'm working smarter, not harder. Next slide. My action plan to improve my communication skills. I've gone over most of what I'm planning on doing, so I won't mention it again here, but some of the things I haven't mentioned are, I'll try to reflect on conversations that I have and maybe follow up with that person and have a conversation as needed instead of just reacting at the moment and speaking without thinking. I'm going to review my action plan every day to remain focused on what I need to do. I'm going to share this presentation with my supervisor at my mid-year evaluation and ask him to follow up with me at my yearly evaluation to see how I'm doing. And most importantly, my main action plan is to pray daily to Jesus to help me learn these communication skills needed to better my relationships with all those I come in contact with daily, including him. Next slide, please. Some Bible verses that I have looked at over, it's upside down. Some Bible verses that have been important to me during this course about speaking have been Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. And Colossians 4:6 says, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. And as far as listening, Proverbs 2:2 says, making your ear attentive to wisdom, inclining your heart to understanding. Proverbs 1:3 says, but whoever listens to me will dwell secure and will be at ease without dread of disaster. And finally, Mark 4:2-3, he taught them many things by parables, and in his teaching he said, listen. So I want to thank you, Dr. Davis, for your instruction this term. I feel I've grown and will continue to grow in my communication from what I've learned, and I appreciate you pushing us to do master's level work, and I want to say again, I just appreciate your direction. Thank you.